So about 6 months back, I made an Arch Linux installation guide. And in case you're unfamiliar with Arch Linux, simply put, it's a Linux distribution that's more catered to Linux experts. And it has a command line installer. Now in that video, I showcased a manual Arch install based on the official Arch Linux installation guide. However, there's actually a much simpler way to do an Arch install, especially for someone who has never done an Arch install before. In the Arch ISO, there's actually a command called archinstall, all one word, all lowercase, that Arch enthusiasts absolutely do not want you to know about, because that will give you a guided installer that will essentially install Arch Linux for you. So I'll show you how to use that in this video.
Alright, so if you haven't already, you're going to want to download a copy of Arch Linux by going to archlinux.org and then going to download. And by the way, I'll have this link in the description. And then you're going to go get a download for it. I prefer to do it over BitTorrent. That's what's recommended. I find this way is much faster in my experience, but you would need a BitTorrent client such as Transmission in order to do that. But if you prefer a direct download, then just scroll down here to HTTP direct downloads and then pick a mirror in your country. But anyway, once you've downloaded Arch Linux, you're going to want to flash it to a flash drive if you're installing it on bare metal, or set up a virtual machine with it if you're installing it in a virtual machine. Now, I've already done that. I've got my virtual machine set up here with my Arch Linux ISO, which I've already pre-downloaded before filming this video. But anyway, I'm going to go start up this VM and boot up the Arch Linux ISO. Alright, and once you're in the Arch Linux ISO, you're going to, first of all, want to get connected to a network. Ethernet would be the easiest because you just plug in a cable and off you go. But if you want to connect to a Wi-Fi network, then you could use the IWCTL utility. And I'll have a link to an Arch Linux wiki article on that in the description. That is if you're installing this on bare metal. If you're installing this in a virtual machine, then network configuration should already be taken care of for you. To ensure that you're connected to the internet, just do ping basically any website like youtube.com. And yep, it is pinging, so we should be connected. Once you've ensured that you are, we're going to move on to the actual installation. Now, I'm about to introduce you to a command that Arch enthusiasts absolutely do not want you to know about, because this will essentially just install Arch Linux for you, bypassing all that command line jazz that you're supposed to do. And that is the arch-install command. You basically run that. Oh, my bad, it's actually arch install, no dash, exactly like that. You basically just hit enter, give it a second, and there you go. And you'll notice that the console font will change on you. But anyway, you're gonna select your language. English is fine for me. Keyboard layout, US is fine, and then select your mirror region. I'm in Canada, so I'm going to go with that. So I'm going to press tab to select that, and then enter. And then I'm going to set my locale language to EN-CA for Canadian English, and locale encoding is fine. Okay, now I'm going to partition my drives, and I'm going to select the first one on the list, which is my dev SDA, which is what it'll be for most of you. Then hit enter, and then do my disk layout. In my case, since I'm doing a clean install, I can just wipe all selected drives and use the default partition layout. However, if you were installing this on a dual boot, then you would select what to do with each individual drive. And then you're going to select your file system. I personally prefer ext4. However, if you like Btrfs or something else on the list, by all means go with that one. And I'm not going to set any encryption on this. Grub is fine for my bootloader. And yes, you will want swap space. Arch Linux is fine for the host name. However, if you want to change that, you can do so here. Now I'm going to set my user account, add a user. I'm going to set Drew as my username. Then punch in a password, verify that. Yes, I want this user to have sudo privileges. And yep, that looks good. So I'm gonna confirm and exit. And then under profile, Since I want a desktop environment, I'm going to select desktop. And then this will allow you to select your desktop environment, which if you don't know what a desktop environment is, simply put, it's the look and feel of your Linux desktop. Now there's actually quite a few desktop environments to choose from. The one I'm going with is GNOME, which is what Ubuntu ships with by default. However, there's also stuff like Cinnamon, which is what Linux Mint ships with by default, at least on the Cinnamon edition. There's Budgie, which I used pre-Ubuntu 22.04. KDE, which is a desktop environment that I've also used. There's actually quite a few desktop environments here. You can go look up each one if you want to check out the options. Now be aware that some of these aren't desktop environments, but quote-unquote window managers, which are kind of like desktop environments, except they're very minimal. Like, they don't have all the bells and whistles of a desktop environment. They just manage windows, hence the name Window Manager. Like, Awesome is a window manager. I've never heard of BSPWM, but I think that's also a window manager. Qtile, I feel like, is also a window manager. I'm not 100% sure though, so don't take my word for it. But anyway, I'm going to go with GNOME. And then we're going to select a graphics driver. If you're on a system with an AMD card or AMD integrated graphics, then you're going to go with AMD/ATI. If you're running Intel integrated graphics, then you're going to go with Intel. If you have an NVIDIA card, you're going to go with one of the NVIDIA options. I'd recommend the proprietary driver if you're going to be gaming, just because the proprietary driver will offer you better performance for gaming with NVIDIA cards. However, there is also the open source Nouveau driver and the open kernel module for newer GPUs called Turing Plus, and that obviously is if you're installing this on a physical machine. If you're installing this in a virtual machine, then you're going to want the VMware/VirtualBox open source driver. In my case, I'm installing this in a virtual machine, so I'm going to go with that. And then audio, I imagine most of you are going to want audio, so go set that up. You can just go with the default one, which is Pipewire, and the default Linux as our kernel should be fine. I'll show you the options here anyway. And we don't need any additional packages. And you'd probably want to configure your network, so let's go do that. If you're going to be installing a desktop environment, which I imagine most of you are, then you're going to want to use Network Manager. So let's go with that, and we can set our time zone. I am in America/Toronto, so let's go with that. And we're definitely going to want automatic time sync. We don't need any optional repositories. Alright, this all looks good, so let's go ahead and install. Press enter to continue, and it'll go format or drive, and install Arch Linux, and all the packages that we've requested. So now this will take a while, so I'll speed this up. Alright, now that the installation is done, no, we do not need to chroot into the new installation, and we can reboot the system, and it'll go boot us into our new archinstall. Alright, now I'm gonna go log in real quick, and then it'll bring us into our GNOME desktop, and we've got our default apps here. First, we can look at our settings. Now keep in mind that Arch is a rolling release, so we're going to have the latest version of GNOME. If we go to About the System, we got Arch Linux, and we have GNOME version 43.2. Now, if you're installing software through Flatpak, you can install it through the Software Center. However, on Arch Linux, most of the time you're going to be using the command line to install software. So I can do pacman -H to bring up the help menu, and to install updates you would do sudo pacman -su. Now we're already up to date, and if you wanted to install a package you would do sudo pacman -s foobar, or the package name that you want. If you want to find a list of packages, just go to archlinux.org and click packages, and I'll have a link to this page in the description. And then you can search for a package here, or look at the list of packages. Now, they've actually got a lot of packages in the official repos, and even more in the Arch user repository, or the AUR. For example, I'm gonna do sudo pacman-s screenfetch to install screenfetch, punch in my password, and proceed with the installation. And now we can run screenfetch, since it's a command line app. We are on Linux 6.1.2 already. I'm looking forward to when that comes to Ubuntu. We've got 720 packages. We have the bash shell version 5.1.16. We have a 1366 by 768 screen. We have GNOME 43.2 as our desktop environment, Mutter as our window manager, Adwaita as our GDK and icon theme. Our font is Cantarell and the font size is 11. And we are using 5.3 of 22 gigs, or 26% of this tiny virtual disk. And we've got an AMD A12 9720p as our CPU. I'm not going to read out all the information. And our GPU is supposedly a VMware SVGA2 adapter because we're in a virtual machine, and we are using 930 megs of 4 gigs of RAM. But anyway, you just did your first Arch install. Congratulations.
So thanks for watching. If you liked this video and you found it was helpful, please be sure to hit that like button, share the video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, all that good stuff, and see you next time.